What you're about to hear are 5 true stories from people who had encounters they can never explain. Stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew about what's out there in the dark. These aren't fantasy. These aren't fiction. These are real experiences from real people. Let's begin. My name is Laura, and this happened to me 3 years ago on a stretch of highway I'll never drive again. I was driving home from my sister's place in Nevada, heading back to California. It was around 2 a.m., and I'd made the mistake of taking a shortcut through some back roads to avoid construction on the interstate. The road was empty, completely empty. No street lights, no other cars. Just my headlights cutting through the darkness and miles of desert on either side. I'd been driving for maybe 40 minutes when I noticed something in my rearview mirror. Lights, headlights, coming up fast behind me. At first, I was actually relieved. Another person on this lonely road meant I wasn't completely isolated. But as the lights got closer, something felt wrong. They were too bright, almost blinding. And they weren't getting into the other lane to pass me. They just stayed there, right on my bumper. I sped up. 65, 70, 75. The lights matched my speed exactly. My hands started sweating on the steering wheel. I tried to tell myself it was just some jerk tailgating me, maybe drunk or angry about something. But then, the lights started flashing, not like high beams. These pulses were rhythmic. Deliberate. Flash, 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 pause, flash, 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 pause. Over and over again. I grabbed my phone to call 911, but there was no signal. Of course there wasn't. I was in the middle of nowhere. That's when I noticed something in the flashes of light between my car and the vehicle behind me. There was nothing. No car, no truck, just lights floating in the air. My stomach dropped. I slammed on the accelerator. My little Honda wasn't made for high speeds, but I pushed it to 85, 90. The lights kept pace effortlessly. Then they started moving. Not back, not to the side, up. I watched in my mirror as these lights rose higher and higher until they were above my car. I could see them through my sunroof now, keeping perfect pace with me. That's when my engine started sputtering. My car was dying. Right there in the middle of this empty highway, my car was losing power. I coasted to a stop on the shoulder, my heart hammering so hard I thought I'd pass out. The lights above me, they stopped too, just hovering there, silent. Then my radio turned on by itself. Static at first, then voices, overlapping voices. Some were whispering, some were screaming. None of them were speaking any language I recognized. I sat there frozen, tears streaming down my face as these lights bathed my car in this intense white glow. I couldn't move, couldn't think. It felt like something was pressing down on me, forcing me to stay in my seat. I don't know how long it lasted. Time felt wrong, stretched out. But suddenly, the lights shot straight up into the sky and vanished. My engine roared back to life. My radio went silent, and I was alone again. I drove straight through until I hit the California border, didn't stop once. When I got home, it was 9 a.m. But according to my phone and my watch, only 2 hours had passed since I left my sister's house. A 5-hour drive, completed in 2 hours. But here's what really scares me. 2 weeks later, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered, and there was just silence. Then, before I hung up, I heard something. My own voice, screaming, begging someone to let me go. A recording of me from that night on the highway. But I never screamed. I never said a word. I still get calls from that number. Sometimes it's my voice. Sometimes it's just breathing. And sometimes I hear that radio static and those voices whispering in languages I don't understand. Whatever followed me that night, I don't think it ever really left. My name is Henry, and I need to tell someone about what happened to me when I was 9 years old. It's been 20 years, but I still can't sleep with my curtains open. I grew up in a small town in rural Oregon. Our house sat at the edge of a dense forest, the kind where the trees grow so thick that even during the day, you can't see more than a few feet into the woods. My bedroom was on the second floor, facing those trees. It started on a Tuesday night in October. I remember lying in bed, unable to sleep because of storm rolling in. Rain was starting to patter against my window, and that's when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. At first, I thought it was just a branch, but the tapping, it had a rhythm to it, deliberate, like someone was using their fingernail against the glass. I told myself I was being stupid. My window was on the second floor. There was no tree close enough, no ladder, nothing, but the tapping continued. I pulled my blanket up to my chin, staring at the curtains. They were those thin, white ones that let light through, and in the flashes of lightning, I could see a shadow, not the shadow of a branch swaying. This was the outline of a hand, long fingers, pressed flat against the glass. My breath caught in my throat. The tapping stopped, but the hand stayed there, just waiting. Then I heard it, a voice, soft, almost childlike. "Henry, let me in. It's cold out here." I never told anyone my name. We just moved to that house 2 weeks before. I hadn't even started school yet. The voice came again, more insistent. "Henry, please. I just want to come inside." I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but I was frozen, completely paralyzed with fear. That's when the hand started scratching, not tapping anymore. Long, dragging scratches down the window. The sound made my teeth hurt. I don't know how long I lay there. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. But eventually, I squeezed my eyes shut and pulled the blanket over my head. When I woke up the next morning, I convinced myself it had been a nightmare. Until I looked at the window. There were scratches, deep gouges in the glass, starting from the top of the window and dragging all the way down. I told my parents it must have been a bird or something. They believed me. They wanted to believe me. But here's the thing that still keeps me up at night. When my dad went outside to check for a ladder or anything someone could have used to reach my window, he found footprints in the mud below. Bare footprints, human footprints, leading from the forest straight to our house and then back again. But these footprints, they were wrong. The toes were too long, the spacing was off, and the stride between each print was nearly 6 feet apart. Whatever knocked on my window that night, it knew my name, and it wasn't human. I moved out of that house when I was 18, but sometimes, late at night when it's raining, I still hear that tapping, and I still hear that voice whispering my name. My name's Tyler. I'm a farmer's son from Iowa, and I'm about to tell you why I'll never work a harvest again. This happened during the summer I turned 16. My dad owned about 200 acres of corn, and every year I'd help him with the harvest. Long days, hard work, but honest. That year, something was different. It started with the animals. Our dog, Rex, refused to go near the eastern field. He'd bark and snarl at it from a distance, but wouldn't set foot past the fence line. The crows that usually swarmed our fields, they avoided that section entirely. Dad noticed the corn that was growing wrong, taller than the rest, but the stalks were twisted, almost braided together. The ears were black, rotted from the inside out. "Probably some kind of blight," he said. "We'll have to burn that section." But we didn't get the chance. One night in late August, I was lying in bed with my window open, trying to catch any breeze in the thick summer heat. That's when I heard it, something moving through the corn. Now, I'd heard animals in our fields before. Deer, coyotes, even the occasional raccoon. But this was different. This sounded big, and it was moving in a straight line, not wandering like an animal would. I got up and looked out my window. My room faced the eastern field. In the moonlight, I could see the corn stalks parting. Something was walking through them, something tall enough that I could track its movement by watching the tops of the stalks sway. It was heading toward our house. My blood ran cold. I watched as this thing got closer and closer. I couldn't see what it was, but I could see its path. Straight, deliberate, purposeful. When it reached the edge of the field, maybe 50 yards from our house, it stopped. The stalks stopped moving. Everything went quiet. Even the crickets shut up. Then I saw it. It stepped out of the corn, and I wished to God I hadn't been looking. It was shaped like a person, but wrong. All wrong. Too tall, at least 8 feet. Its limbs were too long, arms that hung past its knees. But its skin, Jesus, its skin looked like it was made of dried corn husks, papery and rustling in the breeze. But the worst part, the absolute worst part, was its face. It didn't have one. Where a face should have been was just smooth, like someone had stretched skin over a blank skull. It stood there at the edge of the field, facing our house, facing my window, and even though it had no eyes, I knew it was looking at me. I ducked down below the windowsill, my heart trying to pound its way out of my chest. I stayed there for what felt like hours, too terrified to move. When I finally worked up the courage to look again, it was gone. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I went outside to look at where it had been standing. There were no footprints, but there was a circle of dead grass, about 6 feet in diameter, completely scorched black, and in the center, a single corn stalk, planted, growing, in the middle of our lawn. Dad pulled it up and threw it in the burn pile. We didn't talk about it, but that night came back, and every night after that for 2 weeks, I'd see it, standing at the edge of that field, always facing our house, always motionless, until the night it started moving again. This time, it didn't stop at the edge. It walked across our lawn, right up to our porch. I watched from my window as it stood there at our front door. Then it raised one of those 2 long arms and knocked. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Nobody in my family moved. We all heard it. We all knew what was out there. After the 3rd knock, it just walked away. Back across the lawn, back into the corn, gone. The next morning, we called some guys to come harvest that eastern field early, burn the whole section. Dad wanted it gone. When they started cutting, they found something in the very center of that field. A scarecrow. We'd never put one up. It was 8 feet tall, made of corn husks, and where its face should have been, someone had carved the words, "Let me in." We sold the farm that year, moved to the city. I've never been back, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear that knocking. 3 slow knocks, and I know it's still looking for me. My name is Jennifer, and I need to tell you about the man who smiled at me. This happened 5 years ago when I was living in Chicago, working the night shift at a hospital. I'd get off around 3 a.m. and take the train home. It was always empty at that hour, just me and maybe 1 or 2 other late-night commuters. One night in November, I was sitting in my usual spot, exhausted from a 12-hour shift, when a man got on at the next stop. He was average height, average build, wearing a gray suit that looked a little too big for him. Brown hair, pale skin, but his smile was wrong. It was too wide, too perfect, like someone had cut a line across his face and just pulled. His lips were stretched so tight I could see all his teeth, every single one, and he was staring right at me. I looked away immediately. That instinct we all have when someone's staring, but I could still feel his eyes on me. I pulled out my phone, pretended to be busy, but in the screen's reflection, I could see him. He hadn't moved, hadn't blinked, just smiling, staring. The train stopped at the next station. I considered getting off, but it was a bad neighborhood, and I didn't know it well. I stayed put. The doors closed. We were alone now. That's when he stood up. He didn't walk normally. He sort of glided. His feet were moving, but it looked wrong, like he was on wheels or something. He sat down directly across from me. I could smell him now. This sweet, rotten smell, like fruit that had gone bad. "You have kind eyes," he said. His voice was soft, almost gentle, but his smile never changed, never wavered. I didn't respond, didn't look at him, just kept my eyes on my phone, my hand hovering over the emergency call button. I said, his voice was closer now, "You have kind eyes." I glanced up. He was leaning forward, close enough that I could see his smile wasn't natural. The corners of his mouth, they were scarred, like they'd been cut, healed, cut again, over and over. Someone had made him smile like that. "Thank you," I whispered, because I didn't know what else to say. "Can I see them closer?" Before I could move, he lunged across the aisle and grabbed my face with both hands. His palms were ice cold. His fingers were too long, wrapping all the way around my head. He pulled my face close to his, that rotting smell overwhelming, and just stared into my eyes, that smile never changing. Then he whispered, "Perfect. They're perfect." The train screeched to a stop at my station. The doors opened. He let go, sat back down, still smiling. "See you tomorrow, Jennifer." I never told him my name. I ran, burst through those doors, and didn't stop running until I reached my apartment building. I called the police. They reviewed the security footage from the train. Here's what they told me. The footage showed me getting on, sitting down, looking at my phone. Then, for 7 minutes, I'm talking to myself, moving my head like someone's touching me, screaming at nothing. The man in the gray suit, he wasn't on the camera. According to the footage, I was alone the entire time. But here's what the police couldn't explain. When I got home and looked in the mirror, there were fingerprints on my face, 5 on each side, pressed into my skin like bruises. And these fingerprints, they didn't match anything human. Too long, too many whirls, wrong pattern entirely. I quit my job, moved cities, haven't taken public transportation since. But 3 months ago, I was walking to my car after work, and I saw him, standing across the street, under a street light. Same gray suit, same impossible smile, and he waved at me. I see him sometimes now, always at a distance, always smiling, always watching, and I know that one day, he's gonna get close enough to touch me again. I just hope when he does, I'm still me when he's done. My name is James, and I need to tell someone about the apartment I rented in Boston. I was fresh out of college, broke, looking for anything I could afford. That's how I found the listing. A basement apartment in an old brownstone. Cheap, really cheap. Too cheap, if I'm being honest. But I was desperate. The landlord was this old woman, Mrs. Chun. She seemed nervous when she showed me the place, kept wringing her hands, and wouldn't make eye contact. "There are rules," she said, handing me a typed list. "You must follow them exactly." The rules were weird. Never go upstairs after midnight. If you hear knocking from behind the walls, do not knock back. Keep the door to the storage room locked at all times. If you wake up and your furniture has been moved, pretend you don't notice. Never, under any circumstances, open the door at the end of the hallway. That last one stuck with me. There was a door at the end of the hallway, old and wooden, with about 6 different locks on it. "What's in there?" I asked. Mrs. Chen's face went pale. "Previous tenant. Storage. Doesn't matter. Don't open it." I should have walked away, but the rent was $400 a month in Boston. I signed the lease. The first week was fine. Quiet. Normal. The apartment was small but decent. The door at the end of the hallway stayed locked. I barely thought about it. Then, on the 8th night, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. My couch had been moved. It was facing the wall. My kitchen chairs were stacked in a pyramid in the corner. My shoes were lined up in a perfect row leading from my bedroom door to the bathroom. I remembered the rules. Pretend you don't notice. So I did. I got ready for work, stepped over the shoe path, ignored the furniture. When I came home that evening, everything was back to normal. But that night, I heard the knocking. It came from inside my bedroom wall. Rhythmic, patient. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. My hand actually lifted. I almost knocked back, but I remembered the rules. I put in headphones, turned up music, ignored it. This continued for weeks. The furniture rearranging, the knocking. Sometimes I'd wake up and find messages written in the condensation on my bathroom mirror. Let me out. But I followed the rules. I kept my head down. I pretended nothing was wrong until the night I broke them. It was around 1 a.m. and I couldn't sleep. I'd heard footsteps upstairs all night, back and forth, back and forth. I was exhausted, frustrated, and I just wanted to ask whoever it was to quiet down. I went upstairs. Broke rule 1. The hallway was dark, empty, but I could hear something. A wet, dragging sound, coming from the end of the hall, from behind all those locks. And I could smell something. That same sweet, rotten smell, like meat left out in the sun. The locks on the door, they were all undone. Every single one. The door was open, just a crack. I should have run, should have left that building and never looked back. But I looked. God help me. I looked through that crack. The room was empty, completely bare. Concrete floor, concrete walls, no windows. But on the far wall, someone had carved something. Carved deep into the concrete with what must have been their fingernails. Hundreds of tallies, thousands, covering every inch of the walls. And in the center, in letters 2 feet tall, 8,394 days. 23 years. Someone had been in that room for 23 years. Counting. That's when I noticed the smell was getting stronger. And those wet, dragging sounds, they were getting closer. I turned around. Something was coming down the hallway. Crawling. Its limbs were bent wrong, moving in ways that made my stomach turn. Its skin was gray, hanging loose like it was too big. And its face, it didn't have eyes. Just empty sockets. But its mouth was smiling. This wide, joyful smile. Like it had been waiting so long for this moment. I ran. Burst out of that building. I didn't pack. Didn't get my security deposit. Just ran. I called Mrs. Chun the next day from a hotel room. Told her I was done. I was leaving. Keep everything. There was a long silence on the phone. Then she said, "You opened the door, didn't you?" "Yes," I whispered. Another silence. Then, "I'm sorry. So sorry. I tried to warn you." "What was in there? What did I see?" "The previous tenant," she said. "We locked him in 23 years ago. We had to. He changed. Became something else. Something that couldn't be allowed out. We fed him through the slot. Kept him locked up. For everyone's safety." "But why?" I asked. "Why keep him there?" Her voice was shaking now. "Because he made us promise. Before he changed completely. He begged us to lock him away. Said something followed him home one night. Something that got inside him. And if we ever let him out." She started crying. "If we ever let him out, it would spread. To us. To everyone in the building. To the whole city. You open the door, James. You let him out." She hung up. That was 3 months ago. Last week, I started hearing knocking from inside my new apartment's walls. And yesterday, I woke up and all my furniture had been moved. The rules don't matter anymore. Whatever was in that room, it followed me here. And soon, I'm afraid I'm going to change too. I can feel it inside me. Growing. Waiting. And the worst part, I'm starting to smile. These were 5 true stories from 5 real people who encountered something they couldn't explain. Something that changed them forever. If you've had a similar experience, or if you have a story you'd like to share, leave it in comments below. I read every single one. Remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that really happened. Thanks for watching. Sleep tight. And whatever you do, don't open any locked doors.